Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Brad Trumbo, crew member with Angler Pros. I want to share a little bit with you here about how to tie an articulated marabou fly for salmon. I'm a big time fly fisherman and just really enjoy using articulated, whether it's a leech or some kind of a marabou fly, anything that has a lot of action to it. This is what we're going to use. This is called strung marabou, and I'm tying flies for chum salmon this evening. And so let me quickly walk you through some of the materials that we have here, and once we get into the tying, you'll obviously understand how I'm going to use them. So strung marabou looks kind of like this. See, it's all really wafty and nice. These things are big long strands of really soft feather that are just gorgeous in water, have a great action. I'm going to use hackle that you would use kind of like a dry fly, or on something like a dry fly, for a little bit of head material. Since it has these dark bars on it, it's a pretty good contrast, and it'll look pretty nice with either a hot bead pink or an orange cone head to give the fly some weight and give it an obvious head. We're going to tie this on a size 4. This is a long shank streamer hook, and that's going to make tying up real easy. And you'll also have some options as far as hooks once you get done with your fly that we'll talk about. And then the trailing hook I'm going to use is a number 2. I think this is a mustad, just a red, really sharp little hook that it floats along very nicely at the end of the fly. And we're going to tie that in with a piece of 30-pound braid. I don't know if you can see this. It's about a 4-inch piece. And so I'll show you how we're going to work that here in just a second. Okay, so let's get started here. First things first, you want to take your long shank streamer hook here, and whatever bead you're going to put on front, whether it's a cone head or a hot bead, but the first step is to always make sure that you feed that thing in there, get it placed on your hook immediately before you clamp it in the vise. I am Mr. Forgetful and don't do that often enough. It's pretty frustrating when you're partway into a fly and you realize that you haven't done that. So that's always a good first step. And then what I like to do second is prep my trailer hooks, and I just take this little piece of braid and fold it over. Come in here and thread it through, and then I just split the difference on that braid with the hook. Wrap it around, pull it tight. Now your hook's ready to be laid in. Next step, got to wrap this bare hook with a bunch of thread. You need to wrap and wrap and wrap. You want to make a lot of friction on this thing. You want to give your material something to bite into. And so you'll notice that I'm going to wrap this thing back 1/2 to 2/3 of the way back to shank here. We don't want to wrap all the way back to the vise because we don't need that excess hook shank, at least not for the fly that I'm tying. And we can talk about some hook options here shortly once the fly is finished. You want to wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap this thing. Make sure you get that shank covered well. Now wrap it back up to the head, pull yourself a little thread out there and give your bobbin a twirl. And what this does is it untwists, which is pretty daggum important. When you start wrapping a whole bunch on these big hooks, you twist up that little thread, and before long, when you need to give it a little bit of tension to wrap something in, it just pops on you, and then that's quite frustrating. So the next thing, we're going to lay in this hook. I always lay mine in point up. I don't think that it really matters because it's just going to, float around back there anyway. But this is just one of the practices that I do. And I usually give it 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch beyond the thread, because that's about how much float you're going to have. And that's partially dependent upon the size of the fly you're going to tie to. These are pretty big flies, and so I leave a fair amount of float back there, but it's all relative, and partially what's your preference and judgment. But throw a soft loop around it up there on the top by the head, pull it tight, and then try to wrap it in as tight to the head there as you, or the bead as you possibly can. And then just like you did when you wrapped the bear shank, work on that thing back and forth and back and forth. And keep your thread, or your braid rather, nice and flat down on that shank. You don't want any loose spots, any loops in it, nothing like that, because all that is potential for a fish to just yank the heck out of it and cause problems. You want it good and flat. You want every millimeter of that thread or that braid covered in thread. And you don't have to wrap it really, really hard or really tight. Just wrap it a bunch. The friction itself will hold it in there. And then finish off up at the head. Again, give your bobbin a little twirl and grab your super glue. Super glue is an important piece here. Probably should have mentioned that earlier. Super glue is the bond that holds all trailing hooks on the shank for me. So you just take that and paste it right in there. It doesn't matter if you get a little extra. It'll be there to grab onto some of your other fly material shortly. You see you've got a little tag end here. I never cut that off. I always just lay it back and wrap it in. And what that does, in my opinion, is it just creates that much more friction. You've got 3 layers of thread around that braid that has now a layer of super glue in it, and that stuff just does not go anywhere. And so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say something here that's gonna jinx myself for probably eternity now, but I've been tying my articulating flies this way with a trailing hook for years, and I've never had a hook pull out on me. I've had hooks snap off right here, but I've never once had a hook pull out on me. Now at this point, you know, this little bitty tag, I'm not going to worry about cutting it off, but if you have any additional, you can clip it off right back here at the end of your wrap. I'm going to clip the tail of this thread off, and be awful careful about getting super glue on your scissors. That's a bad deal. Okay, so your hook's laid in, that sucker is good and solid. So the next step is we're going to start laying in Marabou. So here we go. We've got a nice short piece. Get a few extra strands there. And you can kind of see where these things start to poof out. I generally take and see, I tie utilitarian flies. My flies are not perfect, but they catch fish. And they're quick and easy, and that's what I like. And so I usually just take these things and pinch them right up here to about to where they poofed out. And then I'll take my scissors and I will cut that stuff right off. Whereas the other way to do it is peel your Marabou down and wrap it in that way. But I don't ever really see the need to go that particular with streamers. You want to lay this in here. Make sure that the back end of your Marabou is right here about where the end of your fly is, kind of where or the hook rather, kind of where the point is, or the back of the bend. That's where you want it. Wrap that in a little bit. And I don't usually trim this. I think I will in this instance because this is a little much. But usually I just wrap it in. Doesn't hurt a whole lot on these big flies. We'll give that some wraps here. Now we're going to do something that I like to do. That is, give this baby a little flash. Now, putting in flash utensil stuff may or may not help catch fish. Obviously it's got to be a little bit more visible, but with a color like this, is it really going to matter if you get a little flash when there's some sun in the water? Probably not. So So I would say cut that stuff off about 1 to 1.5 inches long. You don't need it too long. You want it to be right about the back of the fly. Lay it right on top. Throw a soft loop over it. Pull it down. Then I don't worry too much about spreading the stuff out, making sure it's, evenly distributed or whatever, because it's going to waft around underwater. So get that laid in. Whether the flash works or not, one of the rules I like to operate by that I find is absolutely true in my years of fly fishing experience, and that is you tie a fly and you fish with a fly that you like and that you are confident in, because the more confidence you have in your fly, the more you enjoy fishing it, the better you're going to present that fly, the more attentive you're going to be to the fishing, and you're just going to be overall more successful in that mode. So, tinsel might be catching fishermen here instead of fish, but by golly, it makes me think that my fly is doing the job and I enjoy fishing it. So I always put a little bit of flash into my flies. Again, I've got a little bit much here, so I'm going to trim this off. Be careful about your bead migrating back. It'll throw you off on exactly where you're at with the amount of material that you need. If you're not paying much attention to that, it can get kind of squirrely. This time, yeah, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to snag me another chunk of marabou here. Whoa. That's a little bit of a bugger. Not quite what we're looking for. Let's see if I get another piece here. Okay. Now I should be able to finish it off with this last one. I probably use a little bit more marabou than folks that are very meticulous about tying their flies, but in the long run I don't see that it really affects the fishing that I do at all. Yes, you will get messy. You will have fly parts all over the place, feather parts rather. That's just a rite of passage. Okay, I'm going to throw in another short strand of marabou, and again I'm going to make this one a little bit longer, not marabou, rather the tinsel. I'm going to make it a little bit longer because I want it to extend to the back of the fly, just like the others. That might be a wholly arbitrary action on my part, but that's how I like to tie it. Alright, there we have some additional flash. And now for the last piece on the head, I'm going to take this piece of hackle here that's ribbed, and I'm going to use it down to about right here. So we'll peel that out. Just break it off. We're going to wrap this thing in just like you would a dry fly. Whereas we're going to stick the tail into that feather in here, get it started and cinch it down. And then, well, actually something I'm going to do right here to sturdy this head up. Formation of the head, whether it's with the this piece of hackle that I'm sticking in here, or whether it's tying your knot or whatever, another little dab, just a dab of super glue right there will seal up those threads. It'll grab your knot when you tie it up, and it will turn your flashy marabou streamer into a bulletproof salmon slayer. So wrap this thing just like we would a head for a dry fly, like kind of a parachute mayfly, or Okay, and then you want to hold your little tab end out here, your tag. Cross over it just a few times with your thread. You want to make sure you've got a good bite on it before you do anything like cut that off. And that should cinch it down into that super glue too. So you should have very little to worry about with this thing coming apart on you. And be careful with your tag. That little bitty tag is good hackle for a dry fly later on. Pull it back a little bit, give it some wraps. Okay, now it's time for the whip finisher. And if you don't know what that is, it's this doohickey. So you can tie knots with these things by just making loops and twisting your fingers and sticking it over the head and pulling it. Kind of like just throwing a half hitch over it. My fingers are too big to do that efficiently. So I use the whip finisher, and I'll show you here how it works. Hopefully you'll be able to see it here on camera. So you take the little notch here on the bottom end, you stick it down on the thread like this. You twist the front hook underneath so it looks like this. I wrap it one time around, and I lay the thread up like this so it makes a little triangle. And then you just lay the triangle right over that head, wrap it 2 or 3 times, and then you take and just roll it right through there again, pop the bottom out, and pull the top down, and you've just tied a good secure knot. Don't snug it too tight, because if you bust your string now, I mean if you bust your thread now, you'll be okay. But I always do several of these. Maybe it's paranoia, but I rarely have my flies come apart, even after hooking and playing and landing salmon and steelhead. It takes several hard battles to ruin a good fly like this. I mean, then you can start getting them tattered. But my trip to Alaska, I lost a few of my flies, but I must have caught 15 to 20 coho per fly, and some of those were big fish. So you know, the flies, like I said, I tie for utility. I tie a sturdy fly that's got the action that I like to tie and I like to fish, and they work out. And so now, talk to you real quickly. Now that you've got everything tied up, you get your nice. This is an orange cone head. I think I probably presented the pink hot bead in the introduction clip there, but I went with the orange cone head on this one. Now here is an opportunity for you to make a decision. Yeah, if you got any loose pieces, you want to pull them out there. I mean, it doesn't matter; they'll come out eventually anyway. But opportunity for you to make a good decision right here. Depending upon where you're at and what you're fishing for, you might be able to fish multiple points. And so in that case, you've got a nice streamer that has a good solid hook and a floating stinger on it that will absolutely increase your hookups. So if that's legal and you want to fish that, you go right ahead. My preference is always to cut this hook off, and this is such an easy way to tie these big streamers using a regular big streamer hook, and then just lop it off, because it fits, it fits in the vise nicely. If you ever just try to put a bare shank in this vise, I think you can get special vices or what have you to take care of that, but this is just the easy peasy way to do it. And then I just take the pliers, pop that thing off. Now I've got a super articulating fly where at least half of that fly, if not more, has good fluid in-water motion. It's got a little flash to it. It's got a nice contrasting head with a nice orange cone on it, and that is really, really going to be a fun fly to fish. And I guarantee you that's going to be a chum salmon killer in a couple of weeks when I go to fish the run. in Puget Sound. And so there you have it. You've got this nice beautiful fly, and there are a number of different things you can do with these things. You know, you don't have to tie them just like this. Part of the fun of tying flies is just being creative. Here's the daggum monster of a chum salmon killer. Here's a little bit smaller version. It's similar. You can see it's got the same, you know, the same flash, the same head and all that. Just a little bit smaller, about a third less marabou, and this one's got the orange head on it. One of the other things I would recommend is, you know, get creative. You can take one of these flies, and here's a pink marabou fly. This one's got barbell eyes. It's just got some silver tinsel in it. You know, it's a little bit smaller yet, but you can take, you know, 2 or 3 strands of this, not a whole lot, and use it like flash. Lay in just a few strands of pink in there. You can put in black, you can do purple. I mean, you know, whatever you want to do. Tie a fly that you like, something that you want to fish with, and I guarantee you it's going to work out for you. You know, particularly if you've read up a little bit on where and what it is you're going to fish for, it's going to be really hard to come up with a good pattern that's not going to work, even when you're being creative and having fun and making a fly you want to fish. Anyhow, so that's my 2 cents. Quick and easy fly tying there for big streamers that'll have just crazy action in the water and just smash some fish. So if you have any questions, you can look me up online. Contact information should be available through Angler Pros or my own website, which has a link on my crew account there. And so with that, happy tying and happy fishing.